It is that time once again where we have another episode of the Final Fantasy Platinum series. The Final Fantasy Platinum series is a series where I go back and play every available Final Fantasy on PlayStation. I revisit it, I have a good time, and I get the Platinum trophy, and then I compile it all for a video for you guys to enjoy while we reminisce on some of the best Final Fantasy games around. In this episode today, we are going to be looking at Final Fantasy XII. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, got you covered with timestamps in the description down below, so if there is a certain section you want to skip to, feel free to do so, whatever floats your boat. All I ask is for you to support the channel and hit that like button, and if you really like the content and want to see more, please consider hitting that subscribe button. So without further ado, let's dive in to the world of Final Fantasy XII. But I want to start off with my brief history of Final Fantasy XII. It is one of very few Final Fantasies that I've not rolled credits on until this video, and it is also one I have quite a past with, both with the original PS2 version and the Zodiac Age. Let's flash back to the PS2. Now, I played this, it was very different. We'll go into details much later, but I got to Rathwell's tomb and I'd saved my game and I was going to return to it the next morning. The next morning I returned to it and my memory card had corrupted, and I was one of those people that were like, I don't know if I can do all that again, so I just left Final Fantasy XII. Then the Zodiac Age came around and I was like, redemption time. It is time to go back and complete Final Fantasy XII. I didn't do that. I got even further this time around. I can't remember whereabouts I got up to, and I think other games came out or releases were there, and I focus my attention on those, and like I did back in the day with the PS2, I just didn't want to return to it, especially losing knowledge of my playthrough. So here we are now with the Platinum series, and I dove in, I stuck to it, and it was most important to me that I did take breaks, not long breaks, but do it at a nice steady pace to do this game, and I finally rolled credits. So I want to reflect back on the story and the characters of Final Fantasy XII. I liked the story of Final Fantasy XII. I did not love the story. I certainly think that it really did ramp up for me when it came to like the finale, the final stretch. As for its characters, there is that debate. Is Van the main character, or is Balthea the leading man? Or maybe it's Bash, maybe it's Fran, maybe it is Penelo. I don't really want to dive into that debate. The characters are what they are. They all bring something different to the table. When you look at the world of Final Fantasy XII, these characters all have a different perspective and a different stake in the story, and I feel that's where the characters shine. Yes, they have their dull moments, but they certainly have their shining moments as well. I'm interested to see what your opinions on the story of the characters of Final Fantasy XII are. It is just nice and even. I don't think it's bad, but it's definitely not up there with some of the best Final Fantasies that we've had. There is also a slew of side characters or guest characters that we get along the way. Some of these are memorable, like Vossler and Redis, and then we got a few others as well that we have along the way, and side characters that we meet. They all bring something, but it's just overall the world of Final Fantasy XII is quite massive. We'll get into that, and some of these characters can be overlooked, but they bring something at least. Now it's time to dive in to the world of Final Fantasy XII. At a baseline or a casual playthrough, it would just seem pretty average when it comes to the world of Final Fantasy XII. But when you dive deeper into its systems and look around the world and the places you are at, it opens up quite considerably to the point where it could be quite overwhelming. There are NPCs everywhere. They have made the world of Final Fantasy XII feel alive. Compare it to Final Fantasy X. From a city from Final Fantasy X to a city in Final Fantasy XII, there is a considerable amount of NPCs, and all of them have something to say and their text changes as the story changes. So if you really want to dive in, that there is some serious commitment there. I didn't commit to all of it, but I certainly spoke to the NPCs I wanted to, and there are some NPCs out there that kind of offer side quests or things that you would truly miss if you did not do that. But again, there is so much of this, I can see why people may skip this and not want to talk to all the NPCs, but they certainly bring more lore to the world of Final Fantasy XII. I'm going to touch on the bestiary here because this does the same thing. As you fight more enemies and you kind of fight more and more of the same type, you unlock various pages in the bestiary, and there is numerous facts about maybe a place, or maybe there is a diary entry from an NPC, or maybe there is a bit of history within the world of Final Fantasy XII, and it adds so damn much. You can spend hours just reading through these entries, but again, it's a testament to how big the world of Final Fantasy XII is and how much they put into it. But it's that double-edged sword of, is there too much? Would you really want to sit down and read all of this and speak to these NPCs? I don't know. I would like to know your thoughts when it comes to that. Now, we've covered kind of like the bits and bobs of the world of Final Fantasy XII. There is a lot, and if I wanted to do just an entry on the lore and the world, we could probably make a series with how much is there. But I want to talk about the gameplay now, and I want to move on to exploration of Final Fantasy XII. A common trait that we'll go over in this video is how different Final Fantasy XII is to the rest of Final Fantasies, and why that subject and just everything it brings can be quite decisive amongst the fans. We touched on the zones as we were talking about the worlds, and they are big zones to explore. There are big dungeons to explore, and littered throughout these maps are chests. They're everywhere. They respawn. They have their own loot tables. You could get Gil, you could get another Rust, you could get a rare weapon. There are some that are just one-time pickups, and there's some that respawn. There's some that have 100% chance, and there's some that have 1% chance. It's crazy how much variation there is when it comes to just the chests. Speaking of RNG, and that is a common subject when it comes to Final Fantasy XII, rare mobs. You'll go through a zone and there may be a mob that looks like some of the regular mobs, but there is a defining feature, or it might do something different, and it's classed as a rare mob, and it has its own entry in the bestiary. These are here too, and that's a thing in itself, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Keeping on that subject of RNG, traps. Traps are littered everywhere. Some of them are not that bad, you can pass through them, but some of them cause instant death and can really screw up a playthrough. So it's best to make sure that you've got float on, especially during some of those end game dungeons. Speaking of dungeons, they can feel like a slog just because of the traps and just because of the variation of monsters, but they do kind of change it up a bit, introducing some puzzles, and they're a bit of like a thinking element when it comes to these dungeons, and it does get you engaged, but they were few and far between. Overall, I do enjoy the exploration of Final Fantasy XII. It is a double-edged sword, it really is, and I think this game in a nutshell is a double-edged sword. But I had a good time, and when we get over to the trophies, you can see how much exploration is important when it comes to getting that platinum trophy. From exploration, let's talk combat. And again, Final Fantasy XII does this very differently. I believe that it's truly the most unique combat in the Final Fantasy series. You either love it or you hate it, or you just don't want to get involved with it. So mostly this combat system is based around gambits. It is a very in-depth customization to the AI of all of the characters, including the one you are controlling. You can do such things as like make it attack a certain enemy that has a certain HP pool. You can make it so if it's weak against lightning that you use lightning based attacks. You can also flip that to your allies. So if they're blind, you can use blinder, but if you don't have anyone that has blinder, you can use an echo herb. It is truly in depth, and it's something that's just can be split open, and that can be a plus to the game, but it also can be a negative to the game. The thing I found myself doing is that it was just taking out the manual inputs, and I always loved that about Final Fantasy games, that you can really take a moment to think, but it's a little bit different now. You have to think about it when you go into a dungeon. You want to see which gambits are going to benefit you and where you don't have to worry. But then when you're in that spot of combat, you kind of just leave it alone and let it do its own thing. So it's kind of like my fault, but it's also the game's fault because it's offering that option. And I try to do everything manually, but when you've got everything at the disposal with the Gambit system, you kind of put all of your strategy into the Gambit system as opposed to how you tackle the fights live and in the moment. Though there are some boss fights that kind of flip things up, and you do need to think up on the fly, and you do need to introduce new gambits, use certain gambits at one time, turn them off and turn other ones on. Now with the Zodiac Age, we got introduced to something that was exclusive on the Japanese version of Final Fantasy XII, and that's the Zodiac job system. Now for those that are interested of what I went for, I made sure that I had one of each job. So each character had 2 of the jobs. They're all different and they all were in tandem. I tried to pick jobs that complemented each other. So for example, Van was my knight and he was also my bushi, so he was going to be my main DPS. He would have had access to all of the swords and a little bit of white magic on the side as well. It certainly does add layers to combat over the PS2 version, but again, you've got 2 license boards you need to fill out, and as we know, the license boards kind of dictates what equipment you have at what stage of the game, which is good for pacing, but at the same time, when shops don't offer certain items until certain stages, it kind of eliminates the fact of like, I need armor 3 or I need shields 4. That's just my opinion, but the license board system, I could see what they're doing, but I don't think it's fully executed. It was really satisfying to have everything unlocked and being able to have access to everything for those specific jobs that I had for the characters, but the lead up to that and just being on top of that and then having everything anyway kind of eliminated it a little bit for me. I can't forget the fact that we can control Espers in this game. Now, we don't have the traditional summons that we're used to. There's no Bahamut, there's no Ifrit, there's no Shiva. We are introduced to the Espers of the world of Ivalice, and it was fun to control some of these Espers in certain situations, but again, when it comes to gambits and you just wanting to use certain attacks, you rarely find yourself using these Espers. And last but not least, we have Final Fantasy XII's equivalent of limit breaks in quickenings, and these are quite underwhelming. I used a lot of them because one of the trophies require you to get one of the concurrences that happen when you use certain quickenings, but in a nutshell, it didn't really help me out. They were cool to look at. There's some pretty cool animations, and the concurrence animations are also pretty cool, but quickenings in a nutshell, very finicky to use. Yes, you can get really big chains, but I didn't find myself using it too much when I have the Gambit system at my disposal. Now I want to talk about what I really enjoyed about Final Fantasy XII, and the breaks between each play session and the breaks just in general for Final Fantasy XII really helped me to enjoy that, and that's the side content. There is freaking loads of side content to explore in Final Fantasy XII. There was that much side content that this thing certainly came in handy, and just having a look through this book, there is truly a lot of side content. The story section, very small. Side content, freaking massive. So let's dive in what side content Final Fantasy XII offers. There's hidden quests. We touched on this when we were talking about the world of Final Fantasy XII. There are some NPCs that can trigger certain events, and certain events can trigger other certain events, and you can get a bit more lore along the way, though these weren't important when it came to 100% completion. Espers, you get a couple during the story, you get introduced to them, but a majority of them are hidden out in the world for you to explore, with some fun engaging battles, really testing the limits of what you know of that Gambit system. There's extra dungeons, again, which falls in line with the Espers. Some of these dungeons you need to traverse to find these Espers. There's hunts. Man, I kind of love and hate hunts, and I'll explain why. I like the concept of hunts. I like trying to find these more powerful enemies and have a little bit of story between them. I don't like the fact that there's a billion steps to take to complete a hunt. I have to get the hunt from the hunt board or from Mont Blanc. I then have to find the petitioner. I have to speak to the petitioner. The petitioner tells me where to go. I go where I need to go. I fight the hunt. I defeat the hunt. I return to the petitioner. Sometimes the maps aren't quite clear on where we need to go with this, and some of these are very vague. I would have liked just a nice little quality of life when it came to hunts, that I could click a button, that I could go straight to the petitioner straight away, or I could go to where he is located straight away without me having to find point A or point B. Apart from that, Hunts, very enjoyable, very challenging when it comes to the last couple of them as well. And I'm flipping back to the exploration here with the rare mobs. These are a little bit of a nightmare, and I'll probably go into a little bit more detail when we go over the trophies, but some of the requirements to make some of these rare mobs spawn are ridiculous. And I mean ridiculous. One of them require you to just sit in a dungeon for half an hour for it to spawn. It's pretty frustrating, but it kind of adds a charm to Final Fantasy XII. I don't know where I'm finding myself when it comes to talking about these, but they were frustrating but enjoyable when I managed to tick them all off my list. Now, with that all out the way, I want to talk about a feature or a couple of features that was introduced in the Zodiac Age. I'll touch on the music when I talk about the music, but the main one here is the fast forward option. I truly think that the fast forward option is a blessing and a curse. Again, a double-edged sword, some might say. The reason behind this is, yes, it makes grinding very easy, but when you come out of that fast forward mode, especially the 8 or the 4 times one or the 2 times, there's a 2 times and 8 times, or is it a 6 times and a 10 times? I don't know, but there is a faster one. But when you use that and then you come out of it, the game feels very slow. So there came at points where I was relying on fast forward and I was getting frustrated at myself and the game because I was fast forwarding everything and I was hoping the gambits would do what they needed to do, and I was dying and I was like, no, this can't be. But that was my fault because I was relying on this feature way too much. So my advice for anyone using it, using sparingly. Just use it while you're grinding. Don't use it during boss battles. Don't use it while getting those rare hunts, because you will rely on it way too much and you'll start to resent the game. And now I'll talk about the soundtrack of Final Fantasy XII. This is a soundtrack that has very little Nobuo Uematsu except from the main theme, Kiss Me Goodbye. Did he write that? I can't remember. I should have done my research. But we have a new composer, which means we have a new sound. And to be fair, there's no tracks where I'm like, yes. But this is definitely a soundtrack that I would have in the background just kind of playing. There is no notable tracks for me personally. It's nice to hear the main theme of Final Fantasy and the prelude and the fanfare as well. But apart from that, it's a pretty average Final Fantasy soundtrack. But I'm interested to know your opinions. Am I wrong? Is there some tracks that I really should give a good listen? Apart from that, nothing too special here. And here we are at the final stretch here. We're going to talk about the trophies and we're going to flipperoo to the screen here and we're going to go through them. You can see the dates here. You can see when I did my original run of Zodiac Age and kind of stopped. You will notice that as we go down the trophies, but let's talk about these as brief as we can and the challenge that comes with them. So Assault Striker, you're going to get it naturally. Spellslinger, the same deal. Premier Prestidigitator, probably butchered that one, but again, going to come natural to you. Master Thief, it's going to come natural to you if you steal. Blood Dancer, natural trophy. Unrelenting, if you go to the Lusu mines and you get to that bridge that is pretty famous for chaining enemies together and get an early level up, you get this no time at all. Wayfarer, again, a natural trophy you will obtain. Plunderer, natural trophy. Record Breaker, again, if you're doing the hunts and doing everything there, you'll get this no problem. Spendthrift, if you're one of those people that are at shops far too often, you'll get this, again, no problem at all. Privateer, sold 100 pieces of loot. Again, a natural burn. These are very easy trophies to get. Exemplar, raise your average party above a level. If you're going for the grind, you're going to get that trophy no problem. It's an average level of 50, but above 50, not everyone being above 50, but pretty much everyone over 50 to be fair. Conqueror earned 48,000 license points. Again, one of those things that you get naturally when you're filling out that license board. Scrivener, complete the bestiary. Bestiary. Ooh, that is a beast of a thing to complete. The rare mobs being the one that is going to be frustrating. You'll get a lot of kind of fill outs from the trial mode. If you complete the trial mode, you fill a lot of that up quite naturally and return to your game using that same save. But the rare mobs is probably where you're going to have trouble or where you're going to have the most impatience with it. Just bear with it, take your time, take breaks, and you will get it eventually. Rune Weaver, learn every magic. If you're following any kind of guide or got a strategy guide like me, you'll find these magics no problem. Same here with the techniques, you'll find these in chests as you go along. You probably will be missing a few as you get towards the end of the game, but there is a dungeon at the end of the game where you'll find the last techniques that you need. Collector obtained a morbid urn. You have to do a set of side quests here and you'll get these eventually. You have to do a couple of hunts, get a couple of items, and then trigger a side quest train. Not too much of an issue, you just need to put the time out, but if you're going to be doing everything anyway, you'll come across this quite naturally. Cartographer, explore every map. I thought I had to explore every map, every nook and cranny, much like Final Fantasy IV on the DS, where you have to kind of go to the edges to get that 100%. Not the case here. As long as you visit every area, you're all good. Mistwalker, performed every concurrence. This was the trophy that probably took the most time because this is all RNG. Essentially, you need to make sure that you're doing every concurrence, every final kind of limit break at the end of your quickenings. You need 4 level 3. You need 4 level 2, and you need 4 level 1. I have a notebook here in front of me. I don't know if this is going to come across on camera very well, but I was trying to figure out quite naturally what I needed to do, and that's how many turns it took me to do. You can see it all there. If you can't, then it's not making any sense to you if you're listening, but it's there. That's all it took. And I got there at the end, and I was very happy that I did not have to find Black Hole ever again. Eagle Eye, defeat Death Gaze. These are all hunts that we're coming across now. You won't need to have any problems. If you go in for everything, you'll get these quite naturally. You probably want some strategies. Yezomat here is probably much easier to defeat during the trial mode as opposed to actually going in there and doing it. Radiant Saver, Fell Angel, you got some Espers here, collecting every Esper. Again, if you go in for everything, you'll get this quite naturally. For the Homeland and everything down from here is all story related, and then we have the final 2, Judge, Magistra and Imperator, complete the 100th trial and the 50th trial respectively. You will probably do this quite easily. You just need to go in there with a good team. I went in there when I had Redis in my party, and that's how I did a lot of these trophies. When I had Redis, I knocked out as much as I could, but with that extra 4th party member, he has a rise, which will really help out, and it helped out during this. As you get towards the final 10 trials, you will need to probably not use fast forward. You want to use a little bit more strategy. Make sure you got the right items. Make sure you got that remedy lore all the way up to the best, so you can get rid of those status elements. Even if you've got a ribbon, I didn't have any ribbons and I still managed to get this done. And then when it comes to the 100th trial, I believe there's a little cheap out method that you might want to go for if you're having a bad time with all the judges. But there we have it, the Platinum Trophy. As we scroll all the way up to the top there, the champion of Ivalice. I finally got it, and I'm very grateful that I got it the way I did. I took breaks, I had a good time, and I managed to finally get it done. So there we have it, the Platinum series on Final Fantasy XII. What a journey it's been so far. I urge you to go check out all of the other videos that I've done on the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy XIII naturally comes next. If you've been watching this in order, it might already be up there, but if you're watching this as this video is released, it could take some time. That game is still stuck on the PS3 at the moment. I'm going to have to dig that bad boy up, but don't forget that we are covering the side games as well, so I've definitely got some gap fillers just in case Square Enix finally decides to release it on modern platforms. And when I say modern platforms, I mean available on the PS4 or the PS5 and the Nintendo Switch, because it would be nice to have it on there. So I do thank you for your time for watching this episode of the Final Fantasy Platinum series. Please leave your thoughts and opinions on Final Fantasy XII in the comment section below. If you like the content you've seen, please hit the like button. It will help me out. And if you really want to stick around and see more of my content that I have to offer, then please hit that subscribe button also. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.